What could they see but a hideous and desolate wilderness full of wild beasts and wild men? This wasn't some hopeful vision of a promised land. This was the unfiltered terror of arrival. And for the Puritans who fled to America in the 17th century, the New World wasn't a blank slate, and to many it felt like the devil's den. Their journey into its vast dark forests became a spiritual trial that would forge the very soul of a new nation. They came seeking religious purity, but what they found was a landscape they often interpreted as the active, breathing territory of Satan himself. Join me as we dive deep into how your Puritan ancestors turned the forests of New England into a battlefield between God and Satan, and then used that fear to reshape America forever. Today, on Trace Your New England Roots. Hello, my friends. Welcome back. To get why the Puritans were so terrified, you first have to get inside their heads. The Puritans were English Protestants who believed the Reformation in England hadn't gone nearly far enough. They looked at the Church of England and saw a corrupted institution still clinging to the showy rituals and hierarchies of Roman Catholicism. Their name, Puritan, was actually an insult at first. It was a jab at these extremists who insisted on a pure way of life and worship. And at the heart of their worldview was Calvinism, a theology built on two unshakable beliefs. One, God's absolute power and humanity's total sinfulness. And two, they believed that every person was born a sinner. Salvation wasn't something that you could earn. It was a gift of grace from God given only to a select chosen few. And the catch, you could never be 100% sure you were one of them. This created a deep collective anxiety, a constant need to scan your own soul for clues. Every thought, every success, every misfortune could be a sign of God's favor or his wrath. For some, especially more outspoken dissenters, life in England became unbearable. They faced persecution from the crown and also the official church, who saw them as a threat to social stability. Some were fined, some were imprisoned, and some had their homes watched. Driven by this pressure and fueled by a powerful sense of divine mission, they made a world-altering decision. They would leave the corruption of the old world behind and build a new society, a city upon a hill in America. On board the ship Arbella in 1630, their leader John Winthrop gave a sermon that would echo through American history. He declared their colony would be a model of Christian clarity for the whole world to see. It was a vision of immense hope, but it was also crushing responsibility. They saw themselves as God's new chosen people on a holy errand into the new wilderness. The metaphor was clear. They were the new Israelites fleeing the slavery of a spiritually corrupt England and crossing their own Red Sea, the Atlantic Ocean. But that powerful analogy came with a terrifying flip side. And before even reaching the promised land, the Israelites had to wander for 40 years in the wilderness. It was a place of trial and divine testing. The Puritans used this story to frame their own journey. They had no idea how literal and how horrifying that wilderness would actually feel. And when they arrived, the dream of this new city on a hill collided with a brutal reality. Peering from the deck of the Mayflower, William Bradford didn't see a garden. He saw something alien and hostile. He wrote, "What could they see but a hideous and desolate wilderness, full of wild beasts and wild men? There were no friends to greet them. There were no inns for comfort. There were no towns for safety. And behind them was the ocean that cut them off from everything they knew. Before them was a virtual continent of shadow." And this fear wasn't just a practical response to a harsh new place. It was deeply theological. The Puritans filtered their world through the Bible, and the Bible often presents the wilderness as a complex space, a place of trial and demonic temptation, but also where God tests and provides for his people. It was not a simple hell on earth here, but it was a place of supreme spiritual danger. This idea saturates 17th century Puritan writing, and they saw the vast untamed forest as more than just the trees. It represented a loss of control, the breakdown of social order, and a place of spiritual vulnerability where your soul was laid bare to temptation. Their strict, orderly society, the neat rows of houses, the central meeting house, was a fortress against this perceived chaos. And in paradox, this wilderness condition was a necessary trial. They believed that God had led them there to be tested and to be humbled. But they didn't think this test was a passive one. They believed the wilderness had a dark agent, Satan himself. The influential minister Cotton Mather would later write that the New Englanders were a people of God, settled in those which were once the devil's territories. And as he and others framed it, the devil would logically fight his hardest in the very place where his power was being challenged by God's people. And it was this belief that exploded after the Salem witch trials of 1692. The paranoia and chaos of those trials seemed to confirm their worst fears. Mather, in his book Defending the Trials, The Wonders of the Invisible World, helped reframe their entire colonial experience. Every setback, every conflict with native tribes, every failed crop, every sickness could be reinterpreted as part of a grand plot by Satan to destroy their holy experiment. The wilderness wasn't just a challenge anymore in this view. It was the battleground of a spiritual war. And this worldview did have devastating consequences for the people who were already living there. In the minds of many Puritans, if the wilderness was the devil's territory, then the people who thrived in it were suspicious by association. William Bradford's lament about a land full of wild beasts and wild men reveals a mindset that often equated Native Americans with the untamed, dangerous nature of the forest itself. And while some early interactions were pragmatic and missionary efforts did exist, a powerful theological framework emerged, especially during the times of conflict. And this framework painted the Native Americans as potential minions of Satan. Cotton Mather wrote that Indian powwows or shamans used sorcery to attack the first colonists, believing they were allies of the devil. And this kind of thinking served as a powerful justification for violence. Conflicts over land were elevated into cosmic battles between God and Satan. And many Puritans saw themselves not as invaders, but as saints cleansing a demonic land. This mindset framed their colonial project as a whole as a righteous crusade, turning brutal warfare into what they saw as a religious necessity. This narrative also performed a kind of erasure, presenting the New World as a so-called empty wilderness, conveniently ignored the tens of thousands of indigenous people who had been living here, cultivated and shaped the land for centuries. The very idea of an untamed wilderness denies the existence of a prior civilization. This erasure was tragically sped up by disease. Old world illnesses like smallpox, to which Native Americans had absolutely no immunity, ripped through their communities, killing up to 90% of some of their populations. And to the Puritans, this was not a tragedy. It was a sign of divine providence. They saw it as God himself clearing the path for his chosen people. The land, emptied by plague and by war, was then ripe for the taking. The Puritans believed they had a religious claim to it that trumped anything else. And interestingly, folks, during the Salem witch hysteria, it was almost always English colonists who were accusing other English colonists of witchcraft. And this reveals a very complex hierarchy of fear. While Native Americans were often cast as part of the demonic landscape, the more immediate, insidious threat was seen as the potential corruption within their own city on a hill. And now faced with a continent that they often viewed as hostile, the Puritans' mission was one of transformation. They were there to carve a garden out of the wilds, a new Garden of Eve, to turn a dismal landscape into an orderly commonwealth. And this wasn't just survival, it was a spiritual act. The very act of clearing the forest could be seen as a form of exorcism. Every felled tree was a blow against Satan's kingdom, and building their neat geometric towns with a church at the center of it was a physical manifestation of their goal to establish a beachhead of godliness in a dark land. Their relationship with their animals was also just as pragmatic. Wildlife was either good or it was bad. Predators like wolves were bad. They were diabolical agents that needed to be eliminated. While good wildlife was anything that could be eaten or sold, nature was a collection of resources to be managed for the glory of God and the success of the colony. That being said, this created a paradox that would define America's frontier. On the one hand, the terror of the wilderness drove settlers into fortified towns, and then on the other side, the desire for land constantly pushed them outward deeper into the very woods that they feared. So conflicts like King Philip's War in 1676 would send traumatized settlers fleeing back into the safety, their story reinforcing the collective fear. Yet the lure of land always won out, and the push outward would soon begin again. And even with this worldview, however, there were seeds of what we might call stewardship. Their theology taught that nature, however dangerous, was still God's creation. So they carefully planned land distribution and set aside common areas to avoid wasteful destruction. But let's be clear, folks, this wasn't conservation for nature's sake. It was about the wise, sustainable exploitation of resources for the long-term success of the colony. The goal was always to tame and order the land. The garden, not the forest, was just an ideal. And so as the decades passed, the Puritans succeeded. Well, at least physically they did. And by the 18th century, the landscape in New England had been profoundly changed. The so-called howling wilderness was now dotted with farms and towns, although wolves did still persisted in some areas for another century. But the most dangerous predators, they had been reduced, and many, tragically many native populations in southern New England had been decimated by disease and war. And with the external enemy seemingly pushed back, a remarkable psychological shift began. The source of sin and evil was no longer out there in the woods. It moved into the towns and into the human heart. As the physical threat of the forest receded, nature began to be seen in a new light. And so this laid the groundwork for a complete reversal in the American view of nature. And by the 19th century, thinkers like Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, who many historians see as intellectual descendants of the Puritan tradition, began to divine the very wilderness their ancestors had demonized, or So it was a statement that would have been heresy to William Bradford back in the day. The wilderness was transformed from the devil's den into a new kind of cathedral, a place to escape the sins of society and find spiritual truth. This legacy is extremely complex. The modern American wilderness movement, which was influenced by these romantic ideas and led to the creation of the national park system of today. And as a powerful and positive force, the 1964 Wilderness Act even defines wilderness as a place where man himself is a visitor. And yet, even in this romantic vision, an old colonial echo remains. By defining these spaces as untrampled or virgin, we sometimes perpetuate the myth of an empty continent. We celebrate the beauty of national parks while often minimizing the history of the indigenous people who were forcibly removed from those very lands to create them. So from a hideous and desolate wilderness to a sacred national treasure, America's perception of its wild spaces has changed dramatically. But buried deep in the soil of our national identity is the dark, powerful legacy of the devil's den, a 400-year-old fear that shaped a nation and continues to echo in our complicated relationship with the land that we now call home. If you're interested in exploring more of the hidden histories that shaped America and understand especially how your ancestors lived during those times, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and let us know in the comments what other complex parts of our past you'd like to see us deconstruct next. And last but not least, don't forget to join my Substack, where I provide you with access to exclusive content. Thanks for watching. Again, this is Eric with Trace Your New England Roots, where history starts with your family.